It's 9 p.m. here in the French capital. You're watching live from Paris on France 24. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson, and these are the headlines. New details emerge about the contracts agreed between AstraZeneca, the EU and the UK for the drug maker's COVID-19 vaccine. The documents raise more uncomfortable questions. With the clock ticking, the top diplomats of France, Germany, the UK and the US hold talks to see if and how the 2015 Iran nuclear deal can be revived. And after a 7-month-long voyage, a NASA rover is about to land on Mars in the next half hour or so. The mission will search for clues as to whether or not there's ever been life on the red planet. Good evening. The health authorities in a number of European countries say they're facing resistance to the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. This after side effects resulted in hospital staff and other frontline workers calling in sick, which in turn placed an added strain on what are already overstretched resources. Well, side effects from the jab can include a high temperature and a headache, though they usually disappear within about a day or so. Well, here in France, the AstraZeneca jab started being administered on the 6th of February, and doctors say that it causes more side effects than either of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines. Well, there was a heated exchange between Brussels and AstraZeneca a few weeks ago about deliveries of the jab, but fresh information has now surfaced about the race between the UK and the EU to get their hands on that vaccine. France 24's Shirley Sitbon explains.
It was a key moment in the struggle against the coronavirus. Late December, the UK approved a vaccination campaign with AstraZeneca, getting a head start over the European Union. Every week since then, London and Brussels have raced to get more doses. The lab has not delivered as many vaccines as it promised to the EU, saying its contract with the UK was signed earlier. The EU said that is no excuse to breach the agreement.
We reject the logic of first come, first served. That may work at the neighbourhood butchers, but not in contracts, and not in our advance purchase agreements.
Now CNN has compared the contracts, and it seems the UK did not even sign the deal before the EU. In fact, it's the other way around. And the wording of the two agreements is similar. AstraZeneca has committed to use its best reasonable efforts to deliver the ordered doses. The EU lags the UK in vaccination. About 4% of its citizens have received a dose, compared with 20% of the British. Pfizer-BioNTech have also delivered less vaccines than planned. To speed up the process, the EU has signed new orders. 200 million extra Pfizer vaccines and 300 million extra doses from Moderna. The EU says it has ordered 2.6 billion doses overall.
Now, the French Health Ministry has reported the latest COVID-19 numbers. There have been 22,501 new confirmed cases during the last 24 hours and 271 deaths. Well, both those figures are down on yesterday's numbers, but today's number of cases is up slightly on that of last Thursday. Well, more than 3.5 million people here in France have now received a shot of the vaccine. The French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian is hosting his German and British counterparts in Paris today to see if and how the 2015 Iran nuclear deal can be revived. Well, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is joining that meeting via video link. Well, in 2018, the accord very nearly collapsed when the former US President Donald Trump walked away from it. Well, 3 years on, analysts say that a small window of opportunity remains to salvage that deal.
During his speech to the people of Tabriz on the 43rd anniversary of the city's uprising that led to the Islamic Revolution, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei wanted to make one thing clear: Iran won't concede to Western powers.
حرف فایده نداره، وعده فایده نداره. این دفعه فقط عمل از طرف مقابل ببینیم ما هم عمل خواهیم کرد. با حرف و وعده و اینکه ما این کارو خواهیم کرد اون کارو خواهیم کرد، جمهوری اسلامی این دفعه قانع نخواهد بود، مثل گذشته نخواهد بود. پروردگار
To show it means business, Iran announced it will end inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency from next week. The move comes after former US President Donald Trump pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal back in 2018. In return, Iran has gradually scaled back its nuclear commitments to the accord known as JCPOA. President Joe Biden says that he's prepared to rejoin the deal and undo the diplomatic harm caused by US sanctions on Iran. But the administration has stressed the need for the Iranian government to keep its promises.
Iran should reverse these steps and refrain from taking others that would impact the IAEA assurances on which not only the United States, not only our allies and partners in the region, but the entire world relies. Iran should provide full and timely cooperation with the IAEA.
The US has said it will present a united front with Europe, but with each side waiting for the other to take the first step, space for diplomacy is shrinking. Countries in the Middle East also want to be involved in talks, but this is unlikely to happen. An anti-Iran coalition led by Israel and Saudi Arabia is urging for tougher sanctions. They want to limit an Iranian ballistic missile program, as well as Tehran's regional influence, particularly in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen.
Well, let's get more analysis now, and we can speak to political analyst and Iran expert Adnan Tabatabai, who's also the co-founder and the CEO of CARPO, which are researchers and consultants with a focus on the Middle East. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. The Iran deal has survived really against all odds. The Trump administration, of course, is now a thing of the past. The problem now, however, seems to be that Tehran isn't meeting its obligations. Do you think this deal can be revived?
It can be revived. And I think the issue really here is that the simple fact that it was the US that first left the deal, violated it. And so from the Iranian perspective, the US is the one that has to now make the first step and return to JCPOA compliance. And we heard the words of Khamenei in your report, who said this time around, promises and rhetoric won't be enough. We need to see action, and that action will have to be sanctions lifting with immediate effect and suit, which then would mean that, yes, indeed, it can be revived.
Yeah, but Washington is still saying that it won't do anything until Iran starts fully complying with the deal. So someone is going to have to make the first move. Is that? Can you see that happening, one side or the other?
Yes, I mean, this is a dramatic situation we are in. The years of President Trump's policy in Iran have had their damages, and one of that damages are the utter lack of trust in anything that the U.S. may say or even promise or even announce, because we saw that even under Obama's presidency, when things are announced, they don't come into effect for a host of reasons. Obviously, Iran has done its own bit to complicate things, but longer the of just waiting for things to change. They had to start in one way or another escalate on the nuclear domain with regards to the JCPOA, raise the stakes for all sides. So yes, I mean, we have to, I'm afraid if the US doesn't do move, we probably won't see that move coming from Tehran right now.
Okay, the satellite, the link is really not doing us any favors. I'm just going to try and ask you one more quick question. The link is quite unpredictable at the moment. I just want to ask you, doesn't Iran need this deal more than the United States? I mean, the situation in Iran right now is extremely grave, not least the COVID-19 pandemic. And then add to that the misery that sanctions have brought to the Iranian people. I mean, the United States in the short term doesn't need this deal especially, does it?
I believe that this argument would have been stronger towards the Iranians about 2 or 3 years ago. During my last trip to Tehran earlier this year, I really found out that there is this conviction among some economic, most of them state linked, that the hardest and toughest time is left behind, and that from now on gradual growth can happen. This is also what the IMF projects. But obviously, the hardship will go away much easier if the agreement is basically revived. And this is also why I believe Iran has an interest in doing so. But that interest won't be high enough to kind of dare political suicide internally into a Biden administration that kind of follows suit to the Trump policies of sanctioning Iran into making concessions. Sorry about the connection, but I am also hearing a lot of disruptions. I hope I could give you some useful answers.
It has indeed. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I wish it could have been for longer and with a slightly clearer line. But thank you so much, political analyst and Iran expert Adnan Tabatabai. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to another story we're keeping a close eye on now. One of the jihadists who was kidnapped and who beheaded a French man in Algeria 7 years ago has been sentenced to death. The French mountaineer Hervé Gordel was abducted in Algeria's Djurdjura National Park, and 3 days later a video was released of his gruesome killing, for which a jihadist faction with links to the Islamic State group claimed responsibility. So one man has been sentenced to death. Let's get the latest on what happened in court today. We can speak to France 24's Oussama Senoussi, who is in Algiers for us today. Oussama, just talk us through what happened in the court today.
Yes, good evening. The trial just wrapped up and the final verdict was given about 2 hours ago. So the main defendant, Abdelmalek Hamzawi, who is a jihadist belonging to Junt al-Khalifa, an affiliate of Islamic State terrorist group here in the Maghreb region, was found guilty in charges of abduction, murder, and forming a terrorist group. The main defendant was transported to court in an ambulance and on a wheelchair and with a medical team. But during the trial, what he said to the judges was against what he had said before, and his the information that he gave did not comply with the information that were in the file of the case. Hence, with the given evidence and the eyewitnesses, he was found guilty and was given the death penalty. As for the other companions of Hervé Gordel, the 5 other defendants were found not guilty in the charge of failing to inform the authorities about the abduction of Hervé Gordel, and that was at the presence of the family of Hervé Gordel here in this court. And right after the verdict, Françoise Grandclaude, the partner of Hervé Gordel, spoke to us, and she said that she is finally relieved that justice had been made, and now she can fold the page after she found out about the truth, and she was satisfied about this verdict.
Okay, so an important case, and I'm just wondering what sort of attention this has attracted in Algeria. Has this been front page news in recent days? Is this a case that has been closely watched by the Algerian public? Oussama?
Well, it's hard to say if it was closely watched by the Algerian public, where it was given more importance internationally and especially in France. But for each side, the Algerian authorities were collaborating with the French authorities over the course of the past 7 years to find out the truth and to get the terrorists and the perpetrators who made this heinous crime. And finally, with the efforts of the both parties, they could get one of the main defendants. There are 7 other defendants at large, and they are still looking for them. But we can say that everybody today, either from the Algerian side or the French side, were satisfied about this final verdict, and they think that justice was finally made.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, France 24's Oussama Senoussi in Algiers. Thank you for bringing us up to speed on that. Now, first it was the United Arab Emirates, then it was China, and now it's the turn of the United States that is making the latest entrance into the orbit of Mars in the space of all of this in the space of just over a week. Well, after 7 months on the journey, NASA's Perseverance rover is due to land on the Red Planet later on this evening, and the goal of the mission, which is in collaboration with the European Space Agency, is to bring back samples which could hold clues as to whether or not there has ever been life on Mars. France 24's John-Emile Jamin has this report.
It's the end of a 7-month-long journey, but it's just the beginning of a perilous mission to discover the planet Mars. Tonight, the Perseverance rover is going to touch down in crater G0, an extremely delicate landing which has piqued the curiosity of the entire world.
Ça renvoie plein de fantasmes et on a envie d'en savoir plus, ouais, c'est sûr.
Mars, c'est inexploré, enfin, c'est un peu un truc que personne n'a exploré, du coup, forcément, c'est intéressant.
Perseverance has no room for error. Without human assistance, the little NASA robot has to reduce its speed using parachutes like these, going from 20,000 kilometers per hour to 0 in just 7 minutes. American scientists call this the 7 minutes of terror. On board, the rover is full of complex technology, like this very fragile tube used for taking ground samples from the Martian surface.
It's a whole day, then 7 minutes, then a soft landing. It should be soft because touching down on the face of Mars can be violent. It's a highly sensitive instrument with optical alignments, so it needs a gentle touch for everything to work well.
Landing and takeoff are moments filled with dread. Each time, engineers shield their eyes, like here in 1997, when the rocket Ariane took flight. On Mars, operations such as these are always a high risk.
All agencies together have succeeded in just 40% of Mars landings, so this climate is quite difficult. We hope it works.
The return of the mission is planned for 2030. Before then, it will hope to answer one key question: if life has ever existed on the red planet.